I'm Channing Benson of Split Software. This video is about two different ways of getting dimensional analysis for your experiments. And that would be targeting with attributes versus metrics using event property filtering. So here's the two ways described. Targeting with attributes, what you do there is you pass a list of attributes that describe the user. To get treatment, that's one of the optional parameters to get treatment, is a list of attributes. And then you define targeting rules in the definition of the split that defines the cohort. So for instance, platform equals iOS or platform equals Android. Or it could be something like state equals Utah or Colorado, for instance. Those would be ways of targeting a split with attributes passed to get treatment. The other way is to use metrics that have event property filters. And in this case, the properties are passed in the event along with the user ID, and those properties would describe attributes of the user rather than attributes of the event itself. Like, is this user using iOS? Is this user using Android? Is this user, are they at a premium level in our loyalty program? Things like that. And then the metric definition, you can define it so you only count events where the property, such as loyalty level, has a particular value or set of values. Now let's look at how that works in Split with both of these two options. So for attribute-based targeting, here's a split called front-end discount coupon. We have 3 treatments. And if we go down to our targeting rules, we can see that the first targeting rule specifies that an attribute account type should be in list gold or platinum, so our high-level loyalty program customers, and they get served a percentage high, off, and low. And then the default rule serves a similar or the exact same percentages. And so what this does is create a completely separate population that's going to be experimented on individually, so that the default rule will not apply to any of the gold and platinum users, and all the gold and platinum users will be isolated in their own population. For metrics, the way that would appear with event property filters, here's the definition of a metric called average nights per premium user. And we're measuring the average of event values per user. The event is booking, the value field is nights, and here's where the property filter comes in. And that's where we're checking to see if the account type is in the list platinum or gold. So it's the same check that we're doing in our attribute-based targeting, except here we're doing it for a metric definition. And what this means is the only events that will go into the calculation of this metric are the ones where the account type property is either platinum or gold. Now let's look at how the results of these techniques manifest in the split interface. So let's go back to our definition of the front-end discount coupon split. That's the one that has an attribute-based targeting rule to target our gold and platinum users. And that shows up in the metrics impact. And notice one of the 4 combination boxes at the top here, which select the data you're going to look at, is targeting rule. And right now it's set to the default rule. In order to look at our targeted users, let's go to our preview environment. In order to look at our targeted users, we have to specify that rule, because as I mentioned, it basically defines a separate population. So if we select that rule, we can see how many users were in each of the 2 branches, on and off, we apply. And now when we look at these metrics like bookings per user, we actually see only the results for our platinum and gold customers. So we see that for the gold and platinum users, the bookings per user metric was raised 34.32%, comparing the high treatment to the off treatment. If we want to see how it affected the other users, the non-premium, we can go to the default rule, apply, and we can see it was a less of an impact. It was only 23.44% of a lift from high to off. So our premium users are definitely behaving differently from everyone else. Now let's see how the other technique of using event property filtering in metrics shows up in split results. So here's another split, front end show more info. It's basically just a 50-50 split, and we've got 15,000 users approximately in each treatment. And here's our metrics scorecard, the other metrics we were looking at. And here's the ones that are specific to event property filtering. These bookings per platinum user, average nights per platinum user, and average nights per premium user. This is the definition we looked at earlier. You can see there's no statistical significance in the behavior of the premium users who got on or off treatment, and same thing for the platinum users. For bookings, the treatment didn't seem to affect them specifically. And we can dive in if we want to see numbers specific to those events with that property value. We can dig in and see the numbers here, and we can see that, of all the booking events, there were, in the none treatment, there were 634 where the account type property was equal to platinum, and there were 671 in the Showtext treatment where the account type property was equal to platinum. So this is just restricting the number of events we use to calculate the metric to the ones that have those particular property values. To review, the thing these techniques have in common is they both provide a way of measuring to some degree how a particular cohort behaves. They both require additional information be passed to split API calls. In the case of attribute targeting, you need to pass the attributes to the get treatment call. And in the case of event property filters, you need to pass the property information along with the event information in whatever form you're passing that event to split, be it track, through segment, through mParticle, etc. The differences between these two are that when you use attribute-based targeting, you actually create a distinct experimental population where that population that meets the targeting criteria is separated out from everyone else, whereas metrics with event property filtering are generic in terms of they apply to any split and the entire population of that split, and it gives you a way of saying for a split that maybe with a general target, how did that specific audience respond to that particular split? So some of the considerations in deciding which of these techniques to use are the desired dimensions available? Are the attributes that you want to use to segment out a particular experimental population, do you have those available when you make the get treatment call? Similarly, for event property filters, do you have those property values that characterize the user available when you're calling track or however you're sending your events to split? One thing to take into account if you're using targeting attributes, are those attributes volatile? Do they change over time? So for instance, if you're using a credit score, a user's credit score may change from day to day. So one day they meet the criteria, the next day they don't. And in Split's analytic evaluation, we exclude those users who change rules more than once. And so that's another consideration to using targeting attributes. How much traffic volume do you have? So when you use targeting attributes, you're separating out a cohort from the general audience. And so each of those, there's going to be a smaller amount of users going through the experiment than if you combined everyone. So it might take longer to get to statistical significance depending on what your actual volume on your site is. Here's a key one, which is the ability to act on results. Does it make sense to target a specific audience with your experiment and determine whether or not that audience behaves differently than the general audience if your only decision point is to roll it out for everyone? There's not really a lot of value in seeing that your premium users, for instance, behave differently unless you're willing to act on those results and say, hey, let's just roll this out for our non-premium users if the premium users didn't have a beneficial effect from the treatment. And finally, it's important to recognize that if you're using event property filters on your metrics, that you only get users who perform that event. You don't have an event for the users who meet that criteria who did not perform the event. So in cases of, for instance, a percent of unique users, the denominator is going to be the entire audience for the experiment, not just the audience for the experiment that met those cohort definitions. So that's a consideration there as well. Bottom line, both approaches are valid and have their uses and associated limitations. Targeting of your cohort is a more rigorous approach if you need a full perspective on exactly how that cohort behaved in the full context of the experiment, whereas event property filter gives you an additional piece of information about a specific population within an experiment that was targeted towards everyone. That's it. I hope this was useful to you and you now understand more about the difference between attribute-based targeting and event property filters on metrics.